Yes, hello and welcome everybody. It's Chris here from the Ministry of Dice, and I'm back again today with another one of my video presentation thingamadoodads. And in this presentation today, I'm going to be talking about Dice Masters Affiliations. In fact, the second part of Dice Masters Affiliations. A couple of months back, I did the first part of this series on the Justice League, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Avengers Affiliation. That's right. It's been a couple of months. We took some detours because there were a lot of Dark Phoenix Saga spoilers and new release news for 2021 and such like, but I'm back onto the usual schedule now. And to put it into context, I love the affiliation element of Dice Masters. I absolutely love it. All the different affiliations that are available, and the format, single affiliation format, where you restrict it to cards that only use the affiliations. Absolute favourite format. I like all the team synergies. I'm a big movie buff and a big comic book buff, so I love getting all the teams together from my favourite series and my favourite issues, and playing it out and doing the what if. You know, what if the Turtles got in a ruck with the Guardians of the Galaxy and all that. And so these are little affiliation primers, I suppose. Is it primers? Is that the best? I think that's the right word. We're going to call it that anyway. Affiliation primers. This on the screen right now are the affiliations that I'm planning to do as a series. So I've already done the Justice League, as I say, and I'm moving on to the Avengers today. Incidentally, just as a quick side note, if you're watching this video at the time of release, the idea of the Dice Masters Affiliations is a hot topic for us at the Ministry of Dice. We're hosting a charity event at the end of November, on the 28th of November 2020, called Dice Masters versus Cancer. We're raising money for Cancer Research UK, and the format for that particular event is single affiliation. So it's been on my mind in the last couple of weeks, and will still be on my mind for a couple of weeks going forward just yet. A couple of things to point out about the video. So it's not going to be a blow-by-blow account of every single Avengers affiliated card. I'm just going to pick some highlights, some headlines, some cards that I have a fond affection for because I've used them before, or I've seen them used to great effect before, or I've picked them up in a draft and thought, oh, I'll remember that one, kind of thing. I'm going to divide the video up into a couple of sections. I'm going to talk about the card pool and talk about the sets that have featured the affiliation, and then move into three categories. I'm going to talk about win conditions, I'm going to talk about ramp, and then a section that I've called kind of utility and support, which is where your removal and control and such like go into. So that's to frame up the video. So without further ado, let's take a look at some Avengers cards that I think are great and make great Avengers affiliated teams. So as I say, let's start with the card pool then. We've got 259 cards in the Avengers Affiliation, according to the Team Builder, and that's no surprise, really, because they've appeared across 11 Dice Masters sets, and were a significant feature in the very first Dice Masters set, Avengers vs. X-Men. In fact, many of the sets have an Avengers focus. Avengers vs. X-Men, Age of Ultron, Civil War, the Avengers Infinity Campaign box, Avengers Infinity Gauntlet, all have a strong Avengers-related focus because they're built around storylines or events in the comic book, or kind of loosely around the movies that are Avengers focused. They are an interesting affiliation though, because despite the focus on them and the fact that these very popular characters from the Avengers roster appear time and time again in a large card pool across the game of Dice Masters, unlike other affiliations, they're not really, I don't know what the word is, like the team synergy isn't necessarily there. So even though they've got strong, powerful characters, what you don't see is game text like when with another Avenger, or if an Avenger does this, this one does that. And, you know, whereas in like X-Men or Villains and the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Teen Titans and so on and so forth, there's lots of sort of tribal synergy around the affiliation. The Avengers is a bit less so. In fact, I'd argue that some of the best Avengers support cards aren't actually Avengers affiliated characters, and specifically I'm thinking of cards like Nick Fury Patch from Avengers vs. X-Men, who had a great game effect that doubled attack, but isn't actually an Avenger himself. So depending on how strict your rules are around using affiliations, if you're doing a restricted format, will depend kind of how attractive the Avengers might be. However, if you are looking for an affiliation with a large card pool that gives you a lot of choice and has some variety within it, with powerful cards that can win you the game, then it's definitely one to take a look at. You just might not necessarily have the sort of character-to-character interaction that you might find from some of the other affiliations. And as I take a look at some of the cards in more detail in a moment, you'll probably see that coming through. But yeah, large card pool, appeared across a lot of sets, so really suitable for individuals playing single affiliation who maybe have limited collections or focus more on one set over another, or who've been collecting from the beginning and just want lots and lots of choice. Let's now take a look at some Avengers affiliated cards that are win conditions and can win you the game. So I'm going to start with the OG Avengers win condition. Here she is, Black Widow Serena, a 2-cost fist, super popular and has remained popular throughout the years, right from that very first Avengers vs. X-Men set. She reads, when Black Widow attacks, she deals 2 damage to your opponent. Your opponent cannot prevent this. Your opponent can prevent this by spinning one of his or her characters down 1 level. So, tons of value in this card. Cheap purchase cost. You can get her bought up nice and quick and early. With a max 4 dice, you can get loads of them out in the field, wreaking havoc against your opponent. Low fielding cost, so she's not 1 to get out in the field. Her stats aren't that great, but you're kind of not really looking at her for the stats. She's got a way to deliver damage in her game text, but even if your opponent cancels it, they're still facing a disadvantage. They have to spin their characters down. And trust me, guys, with the cheap purchase cost of the Black Widow, if you've never played with her before, when you're facing 4 of them relentlessly attacking you turn after turn after turn after turn, you soon run out of dice to spin down and start taking that damage. She's amazing. So there's a reason why she's so popular. Well, one thing I like to point out when I'm doing these primers, she's a super rare, and you'll notice as we go through the Avengers cards that a lot of the juicy ones are rare or super rare, so they may be a high cost, in terms of your wallet or your purse, a high cost affiliation to dive into if you're looking to kind of backfill these cards to use in single affiliation teams because they're more difficult to get a hold of. But Black Widow Serena, great card, really popular one, and it's a direct damage strategy. I've used it myself in the past. Yes, I've been one of those filthy people who've used the Black Widow Serena. I paired it up at the time with a distraction, the basic action distraction that has the global where you can pay a mask and pull an attacking character back into the field. And I've targeted my own Black Widow Serena with it, so I can just attack and bring her back ready to use next turn and just relentlessly use her game effect against my opponent, which is pretty brutal. Trust me, it really starts to snowball out of hand. She's not the only kind of direct and damagey style win condition that you can get on the Avengers. Her namesake, Natalia Romanova, the Black Widow and Thor of Earth 23223, is another example of a kind of when attacks direct damage win condition that you'll find in the Avengers affiliation. It's a bit of a stretch. She's a 7-cost bolt, and I'll talk about why expensive Avengers characters are something to consider carefully with this affiliation. But she reads, when Natalia Romanova attacks, deal 4 damage to the defending player, and she's got some big beefy stats there with 044, 155 and 266. So she's double the attack value. She doesn't come with the cancellation clause that the Serena comes with, but of course you're paying for that in the purchase cost and in the fielding cost. She does have some meatier stats though, so she's much more of a threat. It's a super fun card to play around with, but you'll have to consider carefully whether you can get yourself up to that 7 cost. And it's another super rare, interestingly enough. But just another example of that kind of when attacks dealing damage thing that you can find in the Avengers. And I've had lots of fun playing with Natalia Romanova, although not necessarily as part of a single affiliated team. They're not just direct damage, though. The Avengers have got a wealth of muscle as well. If you like beat sticks, then the Avengers affiliation might be attractive to you. I've got an example there on the screen, the She-Hulk Sensational. I've just picked this one because I've got fond memories of using her in Civil War drafts when I drafted Civil War a lot, but she's just another great example of a kind of a single card win condition idea that you can roll into an Avengers affiliated team, although they've got loads of big muscly dudes and dudettes in their roster. She's a 5-cost fist. She's got Overcrush, and with a little bit of added value there in her game text. When a She-Hulk die deals combat damage to both an opposing character die and an opponent in the same turn, gain 2 life. And then she's got the stats to back up that Overcrush with 144, 155 and 267. So yeah, Overcrush, obviously a popular win condition and certainly one to be looked at in single affiliation as a way to go. She's got it all in one single card. She's got the big stats and the Overcrush, but throwing on a nice buff global wouldn't necessarily go amiss here either. So there you go. There's an example of a bit of beat sticky style Avengers win condition that's available. Here's another sort of attacky win condition that I've dropped in there. Ant-Man Petty Thief. He's 3-cost fist. He's got the Thunderbolts affiliation as well, incidentally. He has Awaken. Ant-Man is unblockable. And he's 0-2-1, 0-3-1, and 1-5-2. So certainly on that level 3 with that 5 attack, a very attractive prospect. 4 of those, and you've won the game. It's a bit of a challenge in Single Affiliation because you have to find some more creative ways of spinning him up. I suppose it would depend on how restrictive your format is with regards to basic actions, for example. So if you're locking it down and using basic actions strictly from the affiliation, from the intellectual property, then he's a bit more of a challenge to get spun up and spun down to take advantage of that effect. But if you're open on basic actions, then stuff like Energy Field and Mutation and Polymorph might be a good fit for you. But just another example of a win condition sitting in the Avengers roster, and another nice cheap one to boot at a 3-cost fist. Wasp flitting about. So 3-cost bolt. She's interesting because she crosses the divide, really. She's direct damage and she's can be a bit of a beat stick. She's got a tune there, which seasoned players will know is a ping of damage to a player or a character when you play an action dice. But she's also got a bit of added value there where she says when you use a tune on this card or another, Wasp gets +1 attack and +1 defense. And she's 1-2-2, 1-2-3, 2-3-4. So she's a bit pricey in the fielding costs. There's no denying that. But she's got a fairly decent-ish platform to then build that stat buff upon. So a great card to combo up with some cheap actions or some cheap basic actions, of which there's no shortage of for the Avengers affiliation. If you're allowing actions in the core team, of course, there's tons of options. The first one that immediately springs to mind is Avengers Affinity card. Avengers ID card, sorry, not Avengers Infinity card. Avengers ID card, which gives the one that gives a stat buff is one that you might want to take a look at. Nice cheap action to use, but if you're restricted on actions, then possibly not. But she's got a method of clearing fields. Get rid of weenies. She's got a method of directly damaging your opponent. And she can become pretty big and scary if your action strategy is right to marry up with that. And I've got my next card, in fact, who is technically should be in the utility section because it's removal, but I've put it here in the win condition because I consider that large area of effect board clear style approach more of a win condition card than a utility card. But here's another original popular beast, the Hulk Green Goliath from the AVX set. 6-cost fist, and he reads, while Hulk is active, whenever either you or Hulk take damage, deal 2 damage to each opposing character. Unless he's on his burst phase, which he will be on level 1 and level 2, he says he deals 3 damage instead. So a lovely combo piece there to use with the Wasp, for example. Get a Hulk out, get a Wasp out, and then just load up on your basic actions. Roll those basic actions in, use them. But rather than targeting your opponent's characters or your opponent with the attune damage, target the Green Goliath and then just blast the opposing field with 2 damage. Then do it again, blast it with another 2 damage, or if he's on burst phase, 3. So there's a potential with a Wasp, a Hulk, and 2 basic actions in a turn to deliver 6 damage to all the dice on the other side of the field, which oftentimes is enough to clear it out. And your Wasp is getting bigger from those 2 basic actions, so a Wasp and a Hulk can then walk through for some really significant damage. So a great kind of large area of effect, board clear with the Hulk Green Goliath there, although again, he is a 6-cost, which is something you need to think about with the Avengers affiliation. However, if you might be a bit more janky, you might want to look at the Avengers affiliation and look for more janky kind of stuff going on. Here's a card that I like to use for just a bit more kind of janky approach to winning games. It's Doctor Strange, Never Have You Known His Like. Another expensive one, though, so that's something to bear in mind. A 7-cost mask. He reads, while Doctor Strange is active, when an action die is used, you may use a copy of its effect. You may choose a new target for the copy. And he's 146258389. So he's an expensive geezer, this Doctor Strange, at a 7-cost purchase and a 1-2-3 fielding cost. But the using copies of actions is really, really interesting. Certainly if you're looking to clear a board, there's loads of actions that do kind of board clear effects that you might want to look at. Oh, geez, I just... did you hear that, everyone? I just fizzled out and stopped. There was a very specific board clear action that I had in mind, and then it just fell out my head. It's in the Iron Man War Machine starter pack. Oh, my God. It's just got... It's Kona Cold. It's Kona Cold. There you go. Woo! I was thinking that it's in D&D too. What is it? So you've got stuff like that, so you can kind of double up the damage or use a copy, or he pairs up well. Again, if your basic actions are open, your magic missiles of the world are great. You can end up doing 4 damage instead of 2, or betrayal. Cards like betrayal that do damage for characters that your opponent has in the field. So loads of interesting stuff you can do there. Or you can use, like, double up a buff using with Avengers ID card and then give all your characters +4/+4 rather than +2/+2, or team up, etc, etc. So if you're looking for win condition ideas that are a little bit more janky, a little bit more combo-licious, then Doctor Strange might be the guy for you. I've definitely used him with, I'm pretty sure it was Betrayal. Is Betrayal in Marvel? Oh, God. I should have read up on my basic actions before I opened my mouth, didn't I? Yeah, it's definitely Marvel. It was in Amazing Spider-Man. I mean, I'll go away and check when I finish recording this video, but let me know in the comments below as well, Betrayal, or any other basic actions that you think are a good combo piece for Doctor Strange, particularly in Marvel sets, because some people restrict the single affiliation that way. But anyway, I'm in the weeds. Get back on track, Chris. So there you go. There's some win conditions. That's not the limit of win conditions, as I said before. These are just some key highlights that I've enjoyed using in the past, and some that you may like to structure a team around. But there are others. Again, drop into the comments below and let me know what are some of your favourite Avengers affiliated win conditions that you've used in the past, and let us know, share them with us all, how you've used them. Okay, let's move on to ramp. Now, I think ramp is a problem for the Avengers affiliation. Possibly my memory is failing me and I'm missing a ramp card that is like the one that's going to blow the doors off the Avengers affiliation. But I think with so many really great high-cost characters, we've already looked at some of the win conditions and we'll look at some more in the utility. When building a single affiliation team around the Avengers, one thing you might want to consider is like ramp. Have I got the ramp solution? And this is where you might have to take a closer look at basic actions, cards like Superhero Registration Act or Investigation as your way of getting the dice count up to buy those 6-7 cost characters that are so attractive. But there are a couple of rampy pieces in the Avengers affiliation. Here's one from the Infinity Gauntlet set. Iron Lad Slaying Kang is a 4-cost bolt. When Iron Lad deals combat damage to your opponent, prep a die from your bag. And then he's also got the global here. Once per turn, pay a bolt when a source you control deals damage to a character die or player. If you do, prep a die from your bag. So he's got a little bit of a prep element there. I mean, he's all right. He's decent. It's tough, to make sure that he deals combat damage to get that prep. And then is that a lot of effort to make an Iron Lad get damage through in order to prep just a single dice? Equally, the global relies on your ability to be able to deal damage to your opponent. Though I do like him with things like the Wasp Tune, because you may be able to make better use of his global than your opponent can. But he's fairly cheap, 4 cost. He's got decent fielding costs as well, 0.22, 0.35, 156. So it's a way of ramping, but I don't consider it particularly efficient. That global comes on all of his versions of his card, but the prep game text is on the rare. Sticking with Infinity Gauntlet, we've got the Captain Marvels here as well. Captain Marvel Major Carol Danvers, 5-cost shield. When Captain Marvel deals combat damage, prep a die from your bag. 1, 4, 3, 2, 5, 6, 3, 6, 7. So you've got to buy her at 5 and then maybe pay up to 3 to field her and then do the work to make sure she deals the combat damage for a single dice prep. I don't know if that's worth it. You've got Inspirational Avenger as well, the 6-cost shield from the set. When Captain Marvel is active, when one of your non-Captain Marvel Avenger character dice deals combat damage, prep a die from your bag. So a little bit better, but still you've got to ramp up to the 6 to buy it in order to get ramp, which is often a problem with some of these great ramp cards, is they're expensive in their own right in the first place. But you might want to look at her a bit more closely. She's one of the rare ones that calls out the Avengers affiliation in the game text specifically, and she could be a good fit with an Overcrusher, like the She-Hulk I was just showing on the previous section. But it's pricey. It's hard to get up to it, and another rare once again. So the Avengers, the juicy Avengers cards are high in rarity in my opinion. I went and had a little dig around in my Sidekick app on my phone, just on the off chance I found something else. I found this guy, US agent John Walker. I sort of remember him being around in some Thor drafts back at Element Games. He's a 5-cost fist. When fielded, you may sacrifice a Sidekick die. If you do, prep 2 die from your use pile. 153, 164, and 265 on the stats. So again, 5 cost for a ramp card it could be a bit painful maybe. You need to make sure you can get sidekicks in the field to sacrifice them to get the prep from your use pile, but it's good churn. But I don't know how attractive it is, but if you're playing single affiliation and your options are limited, then you might have to look at one of these cards. But also, I'll reiterate, let me know in the comments below, is there an Avengers way of ramping that I'm missing? I think there might be, and I'd love to know if there is, so let me know if you've built Avengers teams and you've found ways of ramping with them. But most of the time when I've played Avengers as a single affiliation team, I've had to rely on the basic actions as my method of ramping, and specifically, like I say, I've used things like Superhero Registration Act and Investigation. So ramp is a bit of a downside to the Avengers affiliation, especially when they've got so many exciting, expensive characters. Okay, let's move on to utility and support then. So this is just a very broad, generic kind of heading that I use for things like removal cards, control cards, little utility pieces to support your win condition, so on and so forth. And this is where the Avengers can really shine. They've got some great stuff in here. One thing that particularly stands out to me with the Avengers affiliation is that they're great at mitigating damage. They've got lots of characters who are good damage mitigators. One very popular one here is the Black Widow Agent. She was a promo card from the Super Spies Organised Play Kit. 3-cost fist. She's got the Shield affiliation as well. Ooh, do you know what? I've just had a thought. Random tangent, completely off my bullet points. Is there enough Avengers with 2 affiliations that in a single affiliation format you could get a team-up team together? Because I bet there's... So, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. on Black Widow. Oh, is there other Widows that are Shields too? Maybe other... like a Nick Fury, perhaps, that's a Shield and an Avenger. And we've seen a Thunderbolt on Ant-Man. And I bet there's a Guardian... There's definitely Guardians that... Anyway, a thought for another day. I might have just had a little team idea there. There you go, folks. You just heard a live and in the moment flash of inspiration on Chris. What was I talking about? Oh, damage mitigation. So we've got Black Widow Agent. While Black Widow is active, reduce damage from opposing character abilities by 1. Your opponent can't target Black Widow with global abilities. So, great card to have in the field, you know, if you're dealing with X-Men teams that have got a lot of little pingity-ping stuff going on, like Super Rare Jubilee Mole Rat, for example, or Boom Boom, or if you're facing, like, D&D attuned teams, or a Mystic attuned teams, you know, a great solution to deal with that kind of issue. And she's got that little added bit of protection where she can't be targeted by globals herself. So if your opponent's using things like force attack for removal, that's a no-no with Black Widow. But she's not the only example of damage mitigation. Here's another popular one from back in the day, Captain America Super Soldier from Age of Ultron, 4-cost fist, and he reads, while active, prevent all but 1 damage to you from any action or character ability. And he's 153, 154, and 255. And now he's a great combo piece with Black Widow Agent. An old school combo that was very popular back in the day was using Iron Fist, who's a non-affiliated card, who does the same as Black Widow, who reduces damage down to 1, and then you get a Captain America in the field, and he would then subsequently take that 1 damage down to 0. So the two of them as a combo piece would just eliminate any direct damage strategies. And these Captain America was around an awful lot when we were facing Lantern Ring limited only by imagination teams, and Green Goblin sidekick when fielded deals damage when fielded for the counter sidekicks and stuff. So he was always very popular. He's got a little bit of an edge on Black Widow in a way because he prevents all but 1, whereas Black Widow just reduces it by 1. Oh, yeah, so I described the combo the wrong way around. You want Captain America out and then Black Widow. So he's got a little bit of an edge, but of course you pay a bit more for him as well with the 4 cost and the higher fielding costs. He's got a little bit more in the stats department as well. So as a control card that you might then want to use as an attacker, perhaps if you're looking at like a Hulk Green Goliath board clear, then he's got a little bit more muscle to use as an attacker. Incidentally, two side notes there. Hulk Green Goliath's actually banned from the Dice Masters versus Cancer event, so that's not a strategy you can put in play it there. Second point, go and take a look at one of my WTF videos. I looked at artwork. The artwork on this card does my nut in. I can't stand it. It looks so weird and disproportioned, and I can't... Go back and look at the video, because for such a great card, the artwork does my nut. Anyway, damage mitigation. But that's not the only damage. We're on to number 3 here. We've got Thor, a god amongst men. Very expensive at a 7 cost, but while Thor is active, when you would take damage, redirect that damage to Thor. And he's got 156, 268, and 388 on his stats. So, again, expensive fielding costs, but great defense numbers there for someone that you want to redirect damage to. It doesn't specify whether it's character damage, combat damage, direct damage, or whatever. So he's just generically useful to prevent damage that's coming your way. And as I say, those defense stats will allow him to really soak it up. And he's got big stats again, so as a control card, once you've got him out in the field, he can then roll into some sort of attack strategy or be a blocker or, etc., etc., and serve other purposes as well. Just a shame that in the Avengers affiliation, ramping is a bit of a challenge, but another great one. But in lieu of that, you might want to consider number 4 on my damage mitigation list, and another popular one, Ronin between employers. Much more cost efficient, 3-cost mask, also better fielding costs. He's 012, 024, and 135, and he reads, while Ronin is active, once per turn you may redirect all damage from one source to a Ronin character die. So once again, just another great way of mitigating damage. Ronin 2 was super popular back in the day because he could block one character and then redirect the damage from the second character to him, if I've recalled that correctly. So he was effectively, eliminating 2 attackers from your opponent's forces, which was quite nice, and also very useful when facing direct damage strategies as well. He's less in the defense stats, so the chances of him getting KO'd, particularly at level 1, are a bit higher if you're redirecting damage to him. But of course, those low fielding costs become much more an advantage then if he's getting KO'd and refielded, which is nice. But another super rare, and a hard to find super rare as well. People don't give up their Ronins from their collections very often. I went on the chase like a maniac to get this guy. I must have bought so much Civil War. It was ridiculous looking for a Ronin. And I got so many super rare trades, and nobody would swap one of my surplus super rares for a Ronin between employers. It was a sad time, but I now have one. I now own one. So there you go. So yeah, there you go. There's some damage mitigation, but there's other stuff going on in the Avengers affiliation. Here's a bit of removal from back in the day. Hawkeye, longbow, 4-cost bolt. When fielded, Hawkeye deals his attack value in damage to a target opposing character, and he's 031, 041, 142. From the AVX set, very classic kind of removal. We've seen other cards with similar effects before in the DC stuff and in the D&D stuff. He's got decent attack stats at 344. He's a nice way of removing an annoying pest or getting rid of some of your opponent's control. It's not all that often you're facing stuff you want to get rid of that's got more defense than 3 or 4, although it does happen. He's got a low defense himself with 112, so if you haven't got a method of KOing him for yourself, then just throw him down the field. Even a sidekick will kill him at his first 2 levels, so he's quite easy to get rotated round and create those tough choices for your opponent. Block him with a sidekick and KO him, and I'll shoot something of yours again next turn, or let him through and take 3 or 4 damage. So he's a nice card to place your opponent in these challenging decision moments. Avengers affiliated. There's another Hawkeye actually that I'm not putting here that I quite like. It was from, I think it was the Avengers Disassembled OP kit, who it does the same thing, but it's the opposite effect. Is when he's KO'd, he deals his damage, which is quite interesting too. So they've got removal, and that's not the only removal in the Avengers affiliation, just one I've picked to demonstrate today. Here's another piece of removal that really shouldn't be on the headlines list, but I kind of love it, and I've played a lot with it, and so I wanted to bring it up because I could talk about it knowledgeably. It's Iron Fist, Pure Spirit. He's a 5-cost fist. While Iron Fist is active, when your opponent declares attackers, each Iron Fist die deals damage equal to its attack to target opposing character die of your opponent's choice. And he's 042, 152, and 263. So a bit of a mouthful there, but basically, on the surface, you might dismiss this because you might say, well, he's a 5-cost. He's got, his fielding cost's a bit uncomfortable at level 3, and my opponent chooses where the damage goes. But actually, what I've found using this card is that a lot of people run their teams very lean, and they'll have like their win condition dice out in the field, and then they'll have maybe a bit of a ramp dice, and then maybe a bit of control or something to support their win condition. And running a lean team with your sort of 3 or 4 core dice in the field, Iron Fist really messes with your opponent's head in that respect, because if they declare an attacker with, say, their Overcrusher or their unblockable attacker or whatever, they've then got to either kill that attacker with Iron Fist, or kill one of their other really useful utility pieces who could also be a blocker for your go, So you might dismiss it because your opponent chooses, but actually placing your opponent in that position to make that difficult choice is super, super like up in their grill. It's actually quite aggro. And I found it to be a really interesting card to play around with. And those stats, those attack stats, 4, 5, 6, it's not an insignificant attack value for your opponent to consider where they want to put it, So just a really fun card to play around with in the Avengers sets, one that I've had a lot of fun although I'm not sure the opponents I played at the time had fun. Placing my opponent in these difficult decision moments and getting 2 of them out, it's amazing. And it's mostly capitalising on the fact that, in my experience, people try and play with lean teams. It's not often people will buy multiples of dice. They'll buy what they need. So a really interesting way of doing your removal there on the Avengers. I've forgotten what's next. Just here we go. We've seen Green Goliath, but we've got Hulk Jade Giant, another classic piece of removal here. While Hulk is active, when either you or Hulk take damage, knock one of your opponent's level 1 characters out. Unless he's on burst phase, which I'll mention again, he is on level 1 and 2. Instead, knock out one opposing character of any level. So you just need a way of dealing yourself damage or dealing your Hulk a bit of damage, which you can, there's lots of solutions available for that. I'll just revisit Wasp from the win condition slide. It's kind of important that you get him on one of the burst faces. You may have these magical AVX Hulk dice that I have that seem to be only capable of rolling in on level 3. I don't know what that's all about, but it happens to me all the time. And then I'm just like, look at the fielding cost on him, and you can only remove level 1 characters. And then I'm asking my opponent, like, what are the levels on your characters again? And anyway, it's stress. It is stress. But yeah, Hulk Giant, another classic, very old school way of removing your opponent's characters from the field. Wasp, Founding Avengers. So I popped her on, another popular card from back in the day that's an Avengers affiliation. She sort of falls in the disincentive category. She's a card that deals damage when your opponent uses a global ability. Although notice her own global there. Once per turn, pay 2, deal 1 damage to a character or player. So she's a nice pair up with the Hulk, either of the Hulks to kick off their game effect. But yeah, she was one you used to just drop out in the field. You had to obviously accept the fact that your opponent would still use globals, but it might be a way of just getting a few little cheeky extra pings in to soften the ground and make it easier for you to swing in and win the game later. So only really use this one if you're willing to let your opponent use the globals and let them sort of go, I'll take the damage. But it soon catches up. It really does soon catch up. If you've got someone who's got a global on their team that they're using a great deal for their ramp solution, or you're playing like an X-Men team that's wanting to use the Professor X, No More Magnus to field lots of sidekicks to do Jubilee damage, then she's a great one to pop on the team because you're just going point for point then and blow for blow, and it might disincentivize them from doing it quite as often. So yeah, I use this one quite a lot back in the day, and I know a number of people who did also. And then finally, K-Bish, the legend that is Kate Bishop, straight shooter. This was in the Marvel Now organised play kit. She's a 3-cost mask. She's got a pretty handy game text all told. When fielded, deal 3 damage to target villain character die. It's a pretty safe bet, in my experience, that if you're playing the single affiliation format, whether at your local store or in an online event or something, although villains, we've restricted villains for the purposes of Dice Masters versus Cancer, but it's a pretty safe bet, broadly speaking, that someone will have some form of a villain team. In my experience, it's very rare that someone's not produced a villain team. So her game text reads, when fielded, deal 3 damage to target villain character die, which is just broadly useful, But the global is the reason why I popped her in here in terms of utility and support. In addition to that villain removal, she's got the basically what's known as the distraction global. Pay a mask, target attacking character die is no longer attacking. So if you're playing Avengers and you're playing a control game, maybe you're trying to kill your opponent with 1,000 cuts from some Wasp tune or something, maybe, or with a Doctor Strange direct damage basic action strategy or something, I don't know, then she's a great one to pop on the team because for a very cheap cost you can prevent your opponent's attackers. She's also, I mentioned before, like maybe you want your attackers to stay alive and you want to pull them back, so you want to rinse and repeat Black Widow Serena, for example. I mentioned using distraction, but Kate Bishop might be another way of doing it, and she's just a really useful card because there are times when you're looking at your basic action slots and you're thinking, well, a static field or a distraction or a blink transmutation might be useful, but there's 2 basic actions that I really need to make my strategy work, so it's just a way of bringing that global into your game with a character card slot rather than a basic action slot, which could be handy when constructing teams. But yeah, classic bit of control there, very popular bit of control, and one that regular viewers of Ministry of Dice live stream games, and certainly Andy, my partner in crime, knows I like to use an awful lot. Because I'm that guy. So I think that's the last one. Is that the last one? Yes, that's the last one. So there you go. There's my little whistle-stop tour of Avengers. I'll repeat myself just one more time. That's not the limit of what's available in the Avengers affiliation. That's just some highlights, some cards as part of a primer that I've highlighted to give you a sense of kind of how the affiliation plays and interacts with each other, and some of the stuff you might want to use to construct teams around. I am going to move on to the Teen Titans next. So part 3 is going to focus on the Teen Titans affiliation from the DC intellectual property from DC Dice Masters. But I hope you've enjoyed my little walk through the Avengers affiliation today. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up. Drop into the comments below. Let me know about how you feel about the Avengers affiliation, what cards you like to use from the Avengers affiliation. If you made some really successful teams using them before, just give us a shout and let us know. Don't forget to subscribe if you don't already subscribe. And I tell you what else I'd really love. If you did like this video, do us a favour. Share it with a friend who plays Dice Masters. And then, when they've watched it, say, that Dice Masters versus Cancer thing that Chris mentioned, it's a charity event. They're raising money for cancer research. And then share with them the sign-up information for Dice Masters versus Cancer, because I'm very keen for the Dice Masters community to make a really great contribution to the cause this year, especially because we're not able to do the big face-to-face convention that usually raises funds for Dice Masters versus Cancer. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much. I've been Chris, and I will catch you on a video, on a podcast, or over at BritRoller6.com sometime soon. Thanks for watching, folks.